situation in Myanmar right now, the whole world, the international community is quite alarmed with the action by military junta. What's the worst case scenario as far as you can see in Myanmar?
The worst case scenario goes two ways. One is that the Tatmadaw, the Myanmar military, they crack down hard, brutally, using brute force against their own people who are protesting in major cities and towns in hundreds of thousands. And the Tatmadaw would say enough, and then they would try to ride out the storm and prevail at all costs, which means that they would have to use a lot of bullets to kill people in order to keep power. That would be one worst case scenario, because this would result in a bloodshed, humanitarian crisis. There would be people running away, fleeing. Some of them could come over to Thailand, to China, to India. The other one would be, it also would be a worst case scenario. Paradoxically, if the Tatmadaw loses power, if they collapse, if there's hundreds of thousands and millions of people protest, and then the Tatmadaw cannot control the situation, the high command collapses, the Tatmadaw loses control, become in disarray, disorganized, and then there's a vacuum in the center. Central authority is gone, and then you would have we could have kind of a disintegration or the Balkanization, like the former Yugoslavia, where you have all these ethnic minorities in their own states. They could become their own independent, autonomous state, and that would be the disintegration of Myanmar. That also would be a worst case, because you would have the same kind of a humanitarian crisis, whereby the Tatmadaw, whatever is left of the army, might try to fight with the ethnic insurgents, and then the ethnic insurgents might fight among themselves, and then people would have to flee. So these two scenarios, I think, would be the worst case. Hopefully, I hope that we don't get there, but it's difficult now. It looks like there will be some kind of a clash in the coming days.
But probably it's the first time in decades to see how Myanmar people have teamed up and doing the uprising very actively on civil disobedience movement. So it means that people power is still there, and it can create tension. And what's the calculated risk of Myanmar military in order to cope with people power?
The scale of the protests is very broad-based. It's in the major cities and towns, and also it's across strata, it's across society. It's not just the students. It's older people, across demographics, across professions. This is in unison. So to crush this kind of a nationwide uprising, insurrection, you have to kill a lot of people. And I don't know if the Tatmadaw, the military units in the countryside are very battle-hardened. They've gone through a lot of wars and battlefields. They might be able to crush this kind of protest, but involves a lot of bloodshed. And as the pressure inside builds with the pressure from outside, there could be a kind of a crack. The only change I can see maybe is a crack within the Tatmadaw itself. Maybe some of the high command generals, they would think, hey, this is not the way to go. Too many lives lost. We cannot kill our own people like this. Maybe that would be a way to have a breakthrough, some kind of a compromise.
You were in Yangon during the democratic in transition of Myanmar, and you must have met lots of young people, Gen Z, and we see how they are very active this time in civil disobedience movement. How do you read their sentiment in coming out so proactively?
The kind of pro-democracy sentiments among the people first. Young people have been at the forefront because they are tech savvy, they know how to use social media. Despite the internet blackout, they find ways to communicate and organize. And we see some of that in Thailand. I mean, now we're even seeing some, I think it's becoming a little bit like flash mobs. They spontaneously is planning day by day what the tactics will be, where they will protest against which target and so on. So, in my time when I was there teaching for 3 months, I met a lot of people. I think that these were Gen Y, Gen Z. They came to a kind of a realization that they fell behind, that the 50 years of dictatorship was the bottom of the pit. And their livelihoods were not improving, so they were hungry for change. And they worked really hard as a hard-working students. They wanted to learn, they want Myanmar to go somewhere, they want their lives to improve and so on. So I think these people now, they don't want to turn back the clock. they have a vested interest in the future.
To see young people is very active in the protest right now, especially in Myanmar and Thailand. Some even predict that it's ASEAN Spring. What's your take?
So if people who are in the Gen Z digital natives, let's say, they're in the 20s something, even 30 something, they see the world in a different way than their government leaders. If you look at the governments in Cambodia, Thailand, Myanmar, even beyond in the region, except Singapore, very, very young. Vietnam, very old. Laos, very old. These are old men in charge. These are old men governing. And the young people, they're very young, they don't see the old men as their future. They have very different preferences and tastes. They want a different kind of future, a more open future, because they like to travel. They like to be. They like freedoms, because that's how they can order food and that's how they can have their lifestyle. So so there's some common characteristics. I wouldn't say that an ASEAN Spring is such like an Arab Spring. I don't see that. But this could build into a kind of a demographic consciousness among younger people across societies, across ASEAN. Maybe we had the Milk Tea Alliance. So the Milk Tea Alliance was a little bit of maybe a foreshadow of this kind of realization and growing consciousness among young people.